welcome to the stage Dr. Richard Fersman, co-founder of Hugh Life and Global Synergy Group. He will be sharing a compelling story of servant leadership even in the midst of extreme difficulties.
Well, thanks everybody, and also thanks for the honor, really, of being asked to present this small story on a journey that my wife and I have been on to develop the future leaders of Ukraine. Slava Ukraine. I think most, maybe if not all of you, have been on some sort of plotted journey in your life when a voice, some kind of a whisper, some event reached deep into your core and planted a seed. As you got back on track, that seed found places to grow within you. Perhaps it was buried in your subconscious, right? Manifesting into how you would manage people and what you would keep seeking, what you kept bumping into in life, and where you would gladly just give away your time. I've watched firsthand ordinary, everyday people do the most incredible things without fanfare, taking serious risks with no financial reward, purely to make the world a little better for others they had never met. My observations and journey has led me to surmise that our acts of kindness, our acts of service, while at times improbable as a lowrider bike changing lives, right? We're not so much an accident, but bear fruit from a seed. And I'll use the idea of an acorn, or seeds that were planted throughout our lives. These seeds sprout as an idea that you can't let go of. The idea haunts you, it nags you, it inspires you and drives you. And for many of you, and for every presenter that I've seen and have had the privilege of hearing yesterday and today, your idea becomes so bright that it captures the attention of others. So today I'm going to share you a brief story of two journeys, two seeds that ultimately grew into a single idea, into a single series of actions. So this is a tale of a journey. So, and as I go into my journey, I want you to think about, contemplate the idea that human behavior is predictable. Contemplate the idea that if you do certain things, you can expect certain outcomes, that if you deprive people of certain things, you can expect certain outcomes. That's why the stories that have been shared here are so compelling. That which you're laying forward has echoes in the behavior of the people that are inspired by you, or echoed in the behavior by those who have been left out. So my journey begins for you when I was in the Navy. I went on a trip to the Arctic Circle in 1981, and our ship was designed for one purpose, was to listen in on the Soviet Union activity from their bases out of Murmansk and Archangel, which held their nuclear submarine fleet for the Atlantic. That which made The Hunt for Red October so popular, if you remember that movie. Well, this is where Ramius exited in this fictitious story across. Well, we were in the Barents Sea, we were watched. We had a lot of company from the Soviet Navy. They followed us wherever we would go. Yeah, that's me. And that is our company, several of them. They came so close that I could see their eyes. I could see their expressions. I could see them look directly at me. And there was an imperative that was, or an order that was given by President Reagan at the time, that you will not make any friendly gestures towards the Soviet Union sailors on this trip. That was a direct order. Afghan had been invaded. Okay. The Soviets, while I was up there, detonated a nuclear weapon test in Kazakhstan, following one that was done by the state of France. So while I was up there, being a meteorologist, not much into the warfare, I would send up my weather balloons every day, and every day they would come down and they would use small arms and they'd shoot them down, the weather balloon would float, and they would grab that weather balloon, or the contents of it, our little weather station trapped in or elevated by a balloon, they would smash it on their deck and they would look at us like, you're not gonna know the weather here. So one day, a group of my friends and I, we decided, let's not send up the regular weather equipment. What if we load this thing full of, fun stuff, right? Now, we were breaking in direct order from President Reagan, and I understood that, and we all understood it. But we had some cigarettes, and we had some candy, American candy, and there were some photographs of some. We used to, back in the day when I was in, men could bring magazines on board ship. And anyway, we called them goodwill ambassadors that we folded neatly inside and we put them in as well. As well as my friends took a picture of me and my backside with me only wearing shoes. But I was fake. But we sent it up and we just thought, let's see what happens. And I remember the ship's captain standing next to me as I send it up, and they come out and they shoot it, and he goes, you know what, Fersman, they sure hate your weather balloons. And they grab this thing and they splashes all over the deck, and you see they're shocked, there's candy, they're grabbing all this stuff. They're talking to the goodwill ambassadors I sent over, they're scrambling for cigarettes, and they're trying to, hey, attention, Нет, нет, американский, нет, нет. And you see the scrambling on there, and we're all looking at this and going, wow, this is incredible, this is great. And we're laughing, and the captain turns to me and he goes, I take that back. They really love your weather balloons. Now, the next day, that ship was gone. It never came back. Something happened on that crew. Something happened that they did not want repeated. We were really excited to send up more weather balloons, but we were forbidden for doing so. So anyway, but on the other side of the world, in eastern Siberia, a young woman was growing up on a military base in part of the Soviet Union. Her father was a naval aviation officer. And when we fast forward a couple of decades to 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, her father, my wife Irina, refused to join a mafia gang and was beaten to death at the doorstep of their home. A brutal death. She took the train and her family from Mangakto actually all the way into Moscow, and then took another train from Moscow down into Ukraine and ended up living in Yalta, in Crimea, which now is occupied by Russia. And in there, she had an acorn moment in her life when she was working at a palace, and she kept her head down, and the administrator of the palace, the grounds, said, you never have to look down because somebody important walks in the room. And she thought about that. I'm going quickly through this story. There's a lot more there, but I'm saying that planted a seed in her head. And as she got her education, and as she became the first recipient of a scholarship, they decided to do a new type of entry into into university that was based on merit, not on bribes. And she was the first one to get this gold star. She went on to become a teacher in mathematics, because that's the only degree they would allow her to get, and computer science. She took that master's degree. Fast forward, we met we got married. She came to the United States. And after learning English, learning the American way, she said, we need to take this, Richard. We need to take this to Ukraine. I want to change Ukraine. I want to change how we see things. I want to change how the government works. I'm not going to sit here while we do this. So she became a trained facilitator. She became a trained acorn planner. Like many of you, who I look out here and I see our oak trees, Irina transferred herself into the most powerful oak tree I have ever seen. I am married. I have the privilege of being married to the person I consider the hero of my life, the person who I have seen transform and gather so many people together towards her. So in this journey, we decided to bring a couple of cities together to talk about looking at problems from a different perspective. There she had blossomed into this person that was now leading discussions between US cities and former Soviet Union cities. And through this, the idea of empowerment, the idea of having a voice, the idea that, by the way, if we all do this together, it's going to be a little bit better. And she was introduced to Ukraine in a way that she hadn't seen it before. Not from a military base, but from a cultural perspective, something that got deep down inside her. We brought Ukrainians back to the United States, and they fell in love with the process that she was introducing them to. As a result, there were sister cities, sister counties, and a desire on Irina's part to go back in 2012 through 2014 and train facilitators there, train people on a new idea, on a new way of thinking. And so she did this with several courses, several classes throughout the country of Ukraine, unknown to her at this time that she was planting seeds, planting ideas in people's head that would be irresistible. In 2014, Ukraine divided when, shortly after the Olympics, we saw this upheaval in Ukraine that when Yanukovych, the president at the time, said, you know, I promised that we'd be part of the Soviet or part of the European Union. My bad, we're going to stick with Russia. We're going to stick with Russia for now. The people didn't like it. They revolted. They turned out. The Maidan was born. They protested. It was a peaceful protest at first. Millions of people throughout the country of Ukraine came together and decided to protest. The protest turned deadly. Here's a before and after picture. This is Independence Square in Kyiv. And it got to the point where the police came out. Barkut, the personal police of the president, began shooting and killed 100 people in one day. The country was divided. You can see here, everything in color here had some sort of Russian-speaking population that was in favor of moving towards Russia. The rest of the country was in favor of moving towards the European Union. There were outbreaks, and especially that red down in Odessa, deadly clashes between activists. And as we watched this, I suggested to Irina, maybe we should hold a peace summit. I mean, I'm a former city manager, and you facilitate. What could go wrong? It was an audacious idea. But we applied, and we got permission from the country to hold a peace summit. So we brought people from all over the country, from these areas shaded in color to the areas in white, and we decided to hold a unification peace summit. Peace and public engagement and civic empowerment. So people from around the country came, There were over 1 million people displaced at this time. It was the first salvo of the war that we're experiencing now. It's kind of the forgotten period, 2014, when the little green men came and invaded Crimea and took over, and Russia's influence was spreading across Ukraine. And in that room, we asked just one question: what kind of country do you want to live in when the war is over? We got people right now dying on the lines. We got people defending our country. What kind of country do we want them to come home to? Now, there's some challenges. We didn't have any money. There are competing organizations. I've learned there's a whole peace industry and war industry that kind of work together. That's my cynicism. But there's a question of readiness with the participants too. Can you bring people together really? So we had 3 languages spoken at this. You could speak English, you could speak Ukrainian, or you could speak Russian, and if you didn't like that, you didn't belong here. We weren't going to have divisions based on what language you used. In the end, all the voices were heard. We went and did a values exercise with over 300 people, only to find out it didn't matter which part of the region you were from. It didn't matter. You held the same values, you had the same ideas, you had the same wants and desires for your family growing up. Didn't matter. They had new ways of being. I talked about Maplewood, Minnesota, where I was city manager. We had explanations of how Poland did it after the collapse of the Soviet Union to give people context. They used that context, and they decided on 10 principles of how they wanted to be governed. Those principles were then sent to the Duma, and as they were reforming, as when Yanukovych fled, they reformed their ideas about their government, decided to decentralize, and picked up these 10 forms, 10 pillars to guide their decision making. And in the process, we learned along the way, your actions, the actions that you're doing in your communities, the actions that you're doing with your staff are a direct reflection of the power that is given to them, the voice that's given to them. And if you're going to give them a voice, give them the opportunity to make a personal commitment along the way. Making a public statement to act is a very powerful thing. Declare it, make sure it's out there. Yeah, you just don't give power away. If you give power away without any intent that we learned, it's really going to get mismanaged and out of control in a hurry. But if you give power with intent, it can be life-changing. And so this brings us to this change in Ukraine, the rebirth of Ukraine. And as we were doing those exchanges, we heard, this isn't going to work, Irina and Richard. We need something different. Could you start working with our kids? Could you start working with those people just like Eric and the bikes? The change of mindset that's required in our country to go from a Soviet mindset into a kind of a democratic free mindset has to start with kids. It ain't going to work with us. And so we started a youth leadership program. I thought we were done after the Peace Summit. No, you're right back in it. Now you're with kids. Now you're really planting seeds everywhere you go. And so the youth forum is born. Youth development, how are you going to become the future leaders? What is the shape of this country going to be in order to make it beable and viable and enough bendable that it's going to shape into the European Union and go to the West? And so we started with kids. I call them kids because I'm an old guy. From 14 years up to 18. We got a little derailed by COVID. As you can imagine, it was hard to do an exchange. We kept online, but then the war broke out, war of 2022, when on February 24th, the invasion started. Now you're going to start seeing pictures and voices in written form from some of our students that just left this past October after spending 6 weeks with us. So this war of democracy versus autocracy. In our U-Lead program that started in 22 and we did another cohort in 2023, here's some of the youth that joined us. Okay. Thing that they all had in common, they had someone on the front. At this point, we decided if you see where some of their homes were and where they were coming from, you understand that they weren't going to be able to pay tuition to come and see us. They weren't going to be able to pay the airfare. They could barely, some of them, afford a second pair of clothes. Not all, but many. Most of them had parents on the front line, and they were very grateful that their kids got to come out. So it was about survival. It's about hanging on, right? They're burying a lot of photographs shared by the kids themselves about what was happening to their families. I can see Ukraine as a country of safety, underground cities made of steel and concrete, reconstruction and reunion, and I'll tell you where that came from. So part of it is understanding that when people are going through shock, unimaginable shock. Took me back to those days on that ship when I could look at those people straight in the eye and I'm going, I don't want to be a warrior. When I told my captain that, he says, well, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. So, and our global synergy group was designed to at first connect city to city, leader to leader, to talk about a new way of thinking about problems. If I can solve your problem, maybe you can give me insights on how to solve mine. And through this exchange, that was what we were about. But now suddenly the war is going on, and all these acorns that have been planted throughout the country started showing up as phone calls, as emails to our home. Because Red Cross wasn't there, Doctors Without Borders wasn't there, none of the apparatus that is usually assigned to UN security teams were not there. People were being overrun by columns of tanks and machinery. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know where to run. There were spies. There were people pretending to be Ukrainian sympathizers mixed in with the Ukrainians. They didn't know where to go, where to hide, what bomb shelter was right, where can I get evacuated. People were getting loaded on buses thinking it was going to be evacuation, and they were being driven in deep inside Russia and put in camps. There was a great degree of who do I trust? So Arena's phone started ringing. Arena, can you get us some medicine? Can you get us in contact? Who do you know? And so this strange network, underground network of, yeah, I know the Rotary guy there. I know the administrator there. I can put you in touch with them and them in touch with you. And the IT group with this group. And before you knew it, we had an underground web of communication going back and forth where I knew who I could trust and I knew who I could call. And we started being able to move people, move medicine, move food, move elderly out, move kids out of harm's way. And in her actions in that, for shelter, medical, communications, food, transit, and even dignity, she was able to save thousands of lives. Little nobody. So it continued in the plan. How in the world do you go from this to the future? And what we were learning from the kids who say, my future in Ukraine, my motherland, my future is among my thriving family, my future is my independent people who won't forget the war, but constantly heal our trauma. So I'm talking about an incredible person here who I wish was here to tell you the story herself. But we were not alone. We were not alone in doing this. Week 1 of their studies is about government. So our program had a couple of they asked, hey, can you take our kids? Can you take some kids over to you and just keep them safe? And Irina said, sure, under one condition. They go through our program and they start looking at themselves, not as victims, but as leaders who are going to go back to that country. Because right now, their city councils, their administrators, their mayors are getting wiped out. Thousands of council members are dead, or in the military have been killed, or in some cases, they were captured and tortured. They don't have a pipeline of leadership anymore in their country. We said, no, these are the new leaders. They are going to go back. They're going to rebuild this country. They have the energy. They have the enthusiasm. They have the passion. They want to do this. They're going to change the country. So if you want to bring them over here, we'll be willing to do that. And you wouldn't believe how people step up. Communities, that's Dean Phillips there. Dean Phillips is running against our president. I don't know if you knew that or not, but he's from Minnesota. Big supporter of Ukraine. That's the mayor of Minneapolis. And through this process, some guy you might know named Ron had a conversation with Irina, and he immediately said, what can I do? He came in and talked to them about the core of everything that we do, the core of servant leadership, which was really the main point we were trying to look at. It's not leadership for self. One of the favorite phrases that you saw them leaving with was, it's not about me, it's not about now. Thank you, Ron, for doing that. He didn't hesitate, and there are so many people that didn't hesitate. He talked to Irina, and Irina said, I'm doing this, and Ron said, can I help? And he said, yeah, this is what you're going to do. And he just went and did it. He got the plane ticket, he flew out, and he met with the kids. They learned how to have council meetings. They learned how, and in this case, city of Bloomington, Minnesota, with the largest mall in America. And by the way, they love it. They're teenagers. Yeah, they're getting the hell bombed out of them, but they still want to go look at favorite fashions. This is where they were asked to design their ideal city. This is where they designed a city underground made of steel and shelters, something that we had never thought of. I know my future has ups and downs, and I don't know what tomorrow will bring, but I choose to live now and open all possibilities. And by the way, all these photographs are taken by a veteran, an Army veteran, who decided to dedicate his life to giving voice to people in trauma. It's called A Piece of My Mind. He met with the students and asked them a simple question: what is the future for you? And so as they were going through this program, you see echoes of that throughout the program. And what I learned from them is that, you know what, Richard, you got to cool down a little bit. You know, quit thinking about tomorrow so much. I've learned that I got to live for today. I don't know if I'm going to be around tomorrow. And I was amazed. Really, you're not afraid? Well, you know, it's not that I'm not afraid, but I got to live for today. Second week started to go into culture. What they brought to us and what we brought to them, and the discussions around our art, how our culture, because their culture is trying to be robbed from them. Their identity is trying to be robbed from them. One of our musicians says, I am a musician so I can hear my future. It sounds difficult. but at the same time, it sounds exciting and amazing. Week 3, entrepreneurship and business. And the idea here is when you go into these pursuits, and Ukraine will need these pursuits, people need business, they need opportunities, you need to grow this country. How are you going to do it? How are you going to grow it with heart? The businesses that took them in were all servant leader business styles. They got that message. A number of mentors, each child was assigned, or each young adult was assigned a mentor in the area of study that they wanted to go. Again, people that had come in contact with someone who came in contact with Arena were now reaching back out and saying, what can I do to help? They're spreading it. Community and volunteering. These kids, from where they came from, were now putting on the yellow vests, cleaning up after Rotaries, going into the communities, doing what they could to give back to the program, meeting with other students. One of the things that I posed to them, we have a certain amount of time, and George Floyd Square was one of the items on our list. It was the most highly sought, voted for event to do. The community there, I will tell you, the two groups together taught me a lot. Well, I was really stunned to see how they resonated with each other. Okay, what happened here, they wanted to know. What was the history? They got the history. They got the idea of a culture being stripped from them. They got a feeling of what it meant to be powerless. They got a feeling of what it meant to be policed in a way that caused suspicion. I don't want to dream about an ideal future. People have power to change, but do they really want this change? It's up to us, was a reflection from George Floyd. People have the power, but do they really want to? The other thing that they really wanted to do, we have an association in Minnesota that takes Ukrainians that have lost limbs. It's for soldiers, it's for children, it's for civilians. Here's a few soldiers that we're meeting to talk about the privilege of service to these kids. They're taught how, through charity, through donations, they were getting prosthetics, and how these soldiers were so inspirational. I am going to rebuild my body so I can go back and help you rebuild our country. We had other events planned that day, but sometimes you just can't tear people apart, and so it just happens. We spent the rest of the day hugging it out. I believe in the future without warriors, people who are kinder and more open to each other. In this way, we can change the world and change ourselves. They also got into the week 5 was education and learning. How does our system compare to theirs? How are you going to rebuild your schools? What new ideas? These kids were all more advanced than the students in the schools that they visited as far as their learning. What they said, though, what we don't have in our schools is soul. We don't have music courses. We don't have sports. We don't have the things that are in the chopping blocks in so many of our schools that they went, wow, this is really rounding out the people. And everybody has a chance. And finally, the weekend's free from war with families and friends. So they did have an opportunity to enjoy themselves. They had an opportunity to live without air sirens going off. conversations that they had with other teenagers about real life. They met a lot of teenagers from America. Okay, and they talked about school. They talked about boyfriends and girlfriends. They talked about all the things that you go to when you're 16, 17 years old. And do you think she likes me? I don't know. And, you know, struggling with sexual identity in a country that isn't as far along as the US. Hearing that, being understood, sharing those conversations, understanding that, and throughout this entire time, kids, they visited police. They got to know the police officers. One of our kids, city of Woodbury, Minnesota, Commander Tom Earhart, he took in a Ukrainian city manager that I know took in 2 kids. Human resource officer took in kids. The fire department took them around. For many of them, it was their favorite day of their work year was seeing people so fascinated in what they do. Some of the wonky kids wanted to hang around the IT departments. Other kids wanted to hang around the medical. They were all fascinated by what you do. It was amazing. How many times you get to go to work and you go, you know, come home at the end of the day, you know, I was really a rock star today. Showed the kid how to download that program. But that's what it meant to them. And somebody listened to them. And they're in contact today. They get back and forth. One of the 14-year-olds on our trip last year is in the Army today as a programmer because he can break code. He's coding drones and breaking into Russian banks. Pretty cool stuff. And so on their final project in 2022, they decided how to improve the project for 2023. In the final project in 2023, they started rebuilding projects. Every one of them went back. Every one of them went back with a commitment. And I'll leave you with this. I see a future with Ukrainian victory where we, future leaders, will rebuild our country and make our country strong and with good protection. I will. Thank you. And if any of you have any questions, I know I went way over, so sorry about that. So. All right, I am going to exit right.